Cause it's not something like,
Yeah.
I wake up and like, hey, not gonna go to uni anymore.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Undefined Talk Show. So today we actually have a very special guest, which is Linus, who basically started his business at a really young age, and he did something that I found pretty interesting, which is that he chose to basically not go to school and instead focus on his business instead. So maybe Linus, can you introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi guys. So I'm Linus. Turning 24 this year. So I mean, as Marcus said, I currently run a business in the retail and e-commerce space. It's been around for about 2+ years now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think just here to share a bit more about my journey, I guess, about taking a more, I guess, generally alternative path lah.
Yeah.
But I think it always just boils down to I believe what you like to do and just carving out the path for yourself lah.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell us more about your business, like what is it called?
Right. Okay, so I run like a retail e-commerce platform. Nothing too special in that sense lah. But the platform that we have now was born out from essentially, I guess, the pandemic-ish lah. So the platform is called Synced.sg, SYNCED. A lot of people keep saying Sing, and they go to the internet and type SING and they're like, I can't find you, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we mainly curate innovative tech gadgets from around the world and then bring it onto a physical and online platform for people to actually come and discover and experience. So that's currently what we're building right now lah. But before this, actually we were actually more focused on actually a startup idea,
Right.
Which was actually called District.
Right.
So we started this actually a bit before the pandemic actually became very wild lah. So this was actually launched in November 2019. So the whole idea for District was we were actually trying to like reinvent the retail model,
Yep.
the physical retail model, where we're trying to help online brands go offline. So I guess the data and everything that we kind of saw back then was that physical retail was still a huge part of the retail industry.
Yeah.
Still owning about more than 80%
Right.
in most countries of the revenue share. And a lot of brands that started online will actually find it very difficult to go into physical retail because the ball game is actually very different. You're dealing with different stakeholders, maintaining different operations, etc. So that's a model they wanted to build, which was actually basically to operate a retail store and then get brands to actually pay a service fee to be a part of our platform.
Right.
So like in a very simple way to define it, it's kind of like a WeWork kind of model when it comes to physical retail.
Yeah.
So we actually opened our store November 2019, and then what happened was basically we had traction and our numbers were great.
Yeah.
We decided to we were still a very small company at that point and like any startup, we were playing the game where we found traction, we had customers, revenue. We were like, hey, let's go out and raise money.
Yeah.
It's a very fundamental part to building a startup, I guess. Not necessary, but I think in what we're trying to build with the kind of expenditure costs required, it's something that we needed to do lah. So we went out to raise money for it at the start of last year, 2020. And I guess what happened, everybody knew. I mean, COVID kind of like got worse as it spread from China itself.
Yeah.
And then Singapore was impacted, and then by about April we went into essentially a lockdown.
Yeah.
But in that period, it just became very, very difficult to kind of like raise money for the company, right?
Right.
Because I mean, retail was industry that was kind of like badly affected.
Yeah.
Not as much as maybe like say travel and hospitality, but one of the industries that was badly affected. Because I mean, people would because of the virus want to go out less, and as a result, not go to malls lah. We became very difficult to kind of like convince people to give us money at the point in time when everything was so unpredictable and so uncertain, right?
Yeah.
And there was like so much blood in the market. So we came to a pivotal point where we kind of realized that like, hey, in order for a company to survive, we probably have to pivot,
Yeah.
right? Because if there's no if you're not going to raise money from investors, right, the company requires money to survive, then the company's just going to die.
Yeah.
So we decided to pivot, and that's when actually we moved from District, which was a startup idea, into Sync, which is what we're actually currently running right now. So
Right.
I guess the pivot has been a blessing. I guess you can say the pandemic has been somewhat of a blessing in disguise, because the pivot has went quite well, and
Yeah.
we're still surviving till this day.
Yeah.
In this
Great.
space.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. You know, for people that may be kind of like thinking of maybe starting something or pursuing something, also like how you got to this stage where you said, okay, this is what I want to do.
I guess my story goes a little back like how maybe like the in sense a foundation was kind of built.
Yeah.
So I guess I never knew when I was younger, I never knew the word like entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But basically that's kind of like what I was doing lah. You know, if you're very familiar with Gary
Yeah.
Vee, when I was like in primary school and secondary school, that was actually what I was actually doing.
You mean you were listening to Gary Vee?
No. I was actually doing what he always preaches, which was actually flipping things.
Yeah.
Right. So I used to be heavily in the trading card scene.
Trading card as in like Pokemon.
Yeah. So not Pokemon, but other games lah.
I see.
The ones that were maybe popular in a certain period of time. Yeah. So like Yu-Gi-Oh, and all these different kind of card games lah. So that's actually how I guess I got exposed to entrepreneurship. Right?
Yeah.
You know, I saw that there were opportunities to basically what I call arbitrage.
Yeah.
Certain markets, which was basically I could buy cards actually in Singapore for a decent price, and then actually sell it for maybe like 2 to 3 times on eBay in the United States.
Yeah.
And that's actually how I kind of like got my hands dirty lah, you know. Of course, at that point in time I was still in school, right? So
Yeah.
I just saw this as like a fun, you know, like I really played trading cards,
Yeah.
and I would typically trade them locally with people, you know, like buy here, sell there, kind of stuff. I was like, hey, you know, like dude, the opportunity online is pretty nice, right? You know, like it seems like nobody kind of like knew about it.
Yeah.
Maybe like this was probably about, I could say like about 10 over years ago.
Right.
So it's like the guy in Singapore trying to sell me the card would sell me at maybe at $10, but he didn't knew that he could sell it online for maybe about $20 to $30, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I basically did lah. I think that's where I really kind of like exposed myself to the whole space of like basically business line. I found it quite exciting, you know, because like you kind of like find an opportunity that, or like a hack that you can actually kind of like leverage on lah.
Right.
So I did that for a couple of things, from basically toy collectibles to music collectibles, for a period of time lah, up until basically maybe I was doing all this while I was basically as like a side hustle kind of thing when I was in school lah. Yeah, then how I went about things thereafter was I guess I kind of always knew that when I grew up I wanted to start something, but not really having an idea of what lah. You know, but just always curious and being open about like, hey, you know, like what are problems that we could solve, what are problems that I face, you know, and always going about these kind of like thought processes lah. The first, I guess, proper venture that I really started was actually when I came out from JC, and before I was going to army, a couple of months in between lah, and essentially at that point in time I had basically one of my juniors so your batchmate, he actually passed me like 2 books to read actually, and then one of the books was actually called 0 to 1. Not sure if you're familiar.
Peter Thiel, right?
Yeah, Peter Thiel, right? So it's a great book on like basically startups lah. But at that point of time, I had no idea what basically a startup was. Right? I mean, I knew about companies that existed that were one startups at that point of time, like Uber, but I never really knew about what the concept of startup was, right? Like basically an idea, and then them raising money, and then slowly finding the customers and building it. And it was actually through reading that book that I was actually very greatly inspired, because the book did touch on very interesting people like Musk, the founders of Airbnb, Uber and stuff, if I'm not wrong and basically just got very inspired by their stories, right? Like wow, just hearing a story for example like Airbnb, which is like now a multi-billion-dollar company, but how they really started in their roots, right? Which was basically just three friends essentially coming out and then trying to solve a problem with people finding hotels to stay, and how they actually got some customers and tractions and then build it up. So it's very inspired by the whole process. I was like, hey, maybe that's exactly what I want to do. You know, I kind of knew I wanted to do business, but startup maybe it's essentially a bit more different, maybe it's a bit more disruptive. You're doing something a bit different, etc., etc. So I was thinking like, hey, like that sounds pretty cool. Maybe that's what I'll do lah. So it's actually in that process, that basically that break between graduating from JC and then before going to army, about that 4 months, that I also made the decision like, hey, maybe I actually don't want to pursue a university degree after basically JC, right? And just focus my time and money to actually building something. Believing that I would learn much more in the trenches lah, instead of behind the trenches, right? So in that process, I decided to actually start something with my friends lah during that period.
After JC, right?
Correct. So that's the thing we did basically. We started we dabbled in basically running a online travel agency. Right.
I remember that.
Correct. So a big successful company that you will know of today that did that model is basically like Klook.
Right.
Yeah, but at that point of time when we started out, they were already operating, but they weren't operating at a scale where we knew them also lah. We kind of just saw an opportunity, right? I had basically two co-founders with me, and one of them, Willie, he's actually basically Indonesian lah. Chinese Indonesian. So a lot of people, he used to travel to Bali very often. Correct. And because of that, he had contacts over there lah. And what we came to realize is that every now and then, like, friends will always ask him for advice, right? Because in a sense, like, we are all Singaporeans, we know nothing about Indonesia, and so he's kind of like, even though he's not like a local there, he's considered like basically like a bridge. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So people asked him for advice, and he had contacts of basically service providers there lah. Like friends that he made over the years, and he'll link basically people that want to go to Bali with all these different service providers. So that's how basically we kind of clicked an idea together, like hey, why don't we just build a platform to connect people lah? Maybe more than our friends need help. Maybe there are travelers from Australia, the United Kingdom, USA, from other regions, because Bali is such a hot spot.
It is,
right? And so that's what we essentially did lah. And we basically played around and built this idea while we were, me and my co-founders were kind of in army in that sense. So it was just really something that we thought like, hey, I didn't really know what, actually, I'll be fair, I didn't really know what to expect out from army. I only knew that it was going to be about 2 years, right? And I was just thinking like, hey, I mean, I'll make the best out of army, but I'm also not sure whether it's productive in terms of my development. So that's also one of the reasons I decided to just start something on army lah. Right? So at least you have something on the side that you can actually grow and learn. I mean, that of course didn't go or grow very well lah. Otherwise I'll still be running it today. So we moved on from that project after about more than 2 years. But essentially, mainly we faced very slow growth. So we had customers and traction, but of course growth was mainly very, very slow lah. I think a part of the reason was we kind of lacked the experience in, of course, growing a business, and at the same time we also didn't have the kind of resources to kind of like do so lah, especially when you're in army. So I guess we did always dedicate time to doing it, but I guess it's just not enough time to doing or building something. Like anybody that kind of like knows or runs a side hustle, they understand, you understand like how difficult it is, like it's not as easy as you would think lah, right? Because like for every successful business you see out there, right, everyone you think like, wow, this person is so successful, he must be rich, right? His story is probably maybe he failed like 10 times before that, or maybe he was the lucky one that succeeded on the first try. But I mean, it's the whole survivorship bias theory, right? At the end of the day, behind every successful one, there might be like 10 or 20 other entrepreneurs that are actually still just trying to get their leg up. And behind them are people that are failing, people that are just starting out, the idea stage, So that's just how difficult doing a side hustle is lah.
Mm.
And I guess we couldn't really get it to kick off, and I think like platforms like Klook and all these started to become very very popular, and in a sense we were like their competitors.
Yeah, makes
But like I don't think we could even be considered because we were so small,
Yeah.
right? But like, it makes sense for us to continue like kind of like building out the model. It's too saturated at that point, so we decided to just move on, but we just learned from that experience, and I guess that's what's the most valuable
Right.
aspect from that.
right.
Yeah, and then from there, basically, I went into venturing into doing, as mentioned, district and
Yeah.
then sing currently lah.
Nice. So I guess something else that because like both of us we came from like a JC, right?
Yes.
SGI. So everyone will be basically talking about uni applications. Did you kind of like already decide then that you don't want, and how was it like? If you told people that.
I mean, okay, I'll just be very frank, right? When I was in
Go
the
ahead, yeah.
education system, I think I was, of course, I wouldn't say brainwashed lah, but of course you would generally think that like, hey, my next progressive step is go to uni, right?
Yeah.
So there's the whole point I'm studying so hard for my final exam, and try and do so well at school so that I get good grades and be able to go to uni.
Yeah.
When literally in my environment, all my peers, my teachers, that was basically the whole objective, right? When you're in an environment that's basically built for academics, right?
Yeah.
Technically, you're inclined, or basically that's the way that you operate.
For
It's very hard
sure.
for you to basically think outside of the system, right?
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
when you do so, you kind of realize that, hey, am I doing something wrong here?
Yeah.
It's a very it's a mindset, especially when we are much younger. We are really, how we really operate as a person is really like how we see our environments to be, right? That's why we always basically learn from our parents. What they do is basically a reflection of like what we do is basically a reflection of them. We learn from our teachers, our peers, and everything. Of course, when you're in school, you would generally just go with the flow lah.
Yeah.
So when I was in school, that's exactly what I was. I always thought I would end up going to a uni.
Yeah.
But back then, my thought process was this. I always still wanted to do business. But my idea was that like, hey, maybe a business degree might not be the smartest thing to actually take. Because I didn't know how practical it was, right?
Yeah.
Then my thought process like, hey, why don't I study a fallback degree?
Okay.
So study something that maybe if I end up doing business and I fail, I have something to rely on.
Yeah.
And to me, that was maybe something related to finance or econs,
Yeah.
right? Because I would generally consider myself to be more of like a math person, and for other people, maybe it's a different kind of study lah.
Yeah.
So I went with that thought lah, but I was never really concrete on anything. I guess like with most people also lah. Very few people would be able to say like, oh yeah, I exactly want to study that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
At such a young age, right? Because
For sure.
like, how do you expect people to kind of like decide what I want to do with my life or the rest of my life at 18?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was like kept things open lah, but I was very in tune with the idea like, hey, I'll just do a fallback degree in one of these spaces lah. And of course, I generally had a university I was aiming to go to, right?
Right.
As with most, basically just goal setting and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff lah. Yeah, so I think I in the scheme of school, I was still like basically, I should find a better term. I was just another student.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah lah. Where my path really took was basically, as mentioned, like when I graduated from school.
Right.
And I guess at that point in time, I was basically out of the system.
Yeah.
Right. I no longer was going to school every day
Yeah.
and being in an environment where I was told to, hey, get better test results,
Yeah.
study harder, etc., etc. And I think it was at that point I started to look out.
Yeah.
I guess when you look out, you kind of realize that, hey, actually the world is much bigger than English, math, biology,
Right.
chemistry, right? And that was when I started to read more about things outside lah.
Yeah.
As mentioned, about startups and everything. And I guess I slowly made the progressive nature where it's like, hey, like I really kind of knew I wasn't going to do a business degree.
Yeah.
My option was to do a fallback degree. But I came from a perspective like, hey, if I want to spend so much money and so much more time to just get a piece of paper,
Yeah.
that I would consider as like a fallback.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of me actually pursuing that,
Right.
right? When I could spend the next basically 3-4 years of my life trying to go out there, as mentioned, in the trenches to build something and learn from the real world lah.
Yeah.
And I think I seeded that idea in myself, and that's a concept that I also kind of believe lah. Seed early and then slowly let the seed grow. And over time, I actually grew inclined to that idea.
Right.
Anyway, I knew army was like 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And I really didn't have to decide on anything. I told myself like, hey, keep things open.
Right.
I guess in army, I slowly went with that idea.
Nice.
And slowly I became more confident with it lah.
Right.
And it was also in that process I managed to not say convince, but got my family and friends are more inclined to this idea
Yeah.
of me not going to basically
I see.
university lah per se. That's with that lah. Like it's a I wouldn't say it's an easy process.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of people when I tell them this, they ask me like, oh, was there something that sparked you to decide
Right.
like this? And I don't think it's something that you wake up
Yeah.
and you go like, hey, I think I'm not gonna do this.
Right.
Maybe for some people it is lah, but for me it was a bit more progressive in nature
Mm.
because you are kind of like slowly breaking down barriers,
Yeah.
mentally, emotionally, physically, in different ways, right? To try and like make that decision,
Yeah.
right? Because it's, as mentioned, when your environment thinks in a certain way and you're geared to think in that way, it's very hard for you to think outside of it, right? So there were things I have to think like, okay, what if I fail?
Mm.
What if what happens if I don't have a degree? What do I do?
Yeah.
Right? What kind of jobs can I work?
Right.
As well, I had to establish kind of like a lot of the fears that I guess I would generally have
Yeah.
if I went with this decision, and kind of like broke it down in a way where I told myself like, okay, am I able to accept and then reject this fear? Right? Like if I fail, like, will I be okay with it?
Yeah.
Yes. Right? I just treat it as a learning experience, pick myself up and go from there.
Right.
So slowly, by breaking down each barrier, I
Yeah.
progressively got to a stage where I became more and more confident with that decision that I
Right.
went with lah. So of course it's not something like,
Yeah.
I wake up and like, hey, I'm not gonna go to uni anymore. To me, I feel like it doesn't work that way lah.
Yeah.
So it was also in that progress I slowly convinced basically family and friends in the process lah.
Right,
That,
right.
maybe this is not the path I want to take.
Right.
Yeah, of course, not everybody will be supportive of the decision.
Of course,
like people that they know me, they will just say like, okay lah, you do what you like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I went with it lah.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable advice and that kind of thought process. Yeah, so something else that I'm very curious, myself, right? I probably started my business when I was like 21, 22.
Yeah.
So, but even then, right, there's like people that are basically kind of like, before I started, or even like the starting stages, they kind of like look at me and like, hey, you're kind of young, like, are you sure you know what you're doing, that kind of thing. I mean, you started way earlier at a younger age than myself because you didn't go to school, right?
Right.
So how was that like?
Typical, I guess, same like you lah. I mean, I was just gonna say like people say these kind of things like, oh, you don't have enough experience, are you sure you know what to do? But I mean, at the end of the day, like, then when do you start?
Right.
Right. That's why the best time to always start is as early as you can.
Right.
Right. That's the only way you'll learn, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you finish uni and you're 25 and then you decide to start this, right? It'll probably be the same.
Yeah.
Like as how you started at 21.
Right.
And maybe you just have 4 years more experience of how the world works, but that's not really going to change a lot of the way that you think about things until you actually really kind of like start it, right? And then at 25, people will probably tell you the same thing, right? It's like, oh, why don't I do this now? Are you sure? You still haven't really like tuition anybody, right? Why don't you go and find a job first before you go and do this, right? And I guess humans also develop playing it safe, right? In some way where like I mean, I read this somewhere like hunter gatherers, right? Like sometimes it's just smarter when you hear a sound. It's just smarter to just run,
Right.
right? Because you don't know whether is it like a lion or a tiger coming to go eat you, right? This was maybe back in the days, right? So, we always want to play it safe. We want to take the path of less risk because they sense it as danger. And I think maybe in the modern era, this is how we respond to these kind of things, right? Where the traditional path is maybe like doing things that are more like, hey, go to school, get a job, and climb the career ladder. And I mean that's totally fine, right? But and then it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But maybe because of the way that our family and friends, maybe our parents would think, they would see this as a bit more unconventional.
Yeah.
And that scares them.
Right.
So they, of course, they have their opinion lah. But
Yeah.
I mean, my thought process to always there's like then when do you start?
Right.
If I start 5 years later, 10 years later, I'll be 5 years late, 10 years late. Whereas like if I start now, I'll start learning as much as I can.
Yeah.
Of course, you won't be successful overnight, right? Like,
Yeah.
the chances of that are like super low.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of things are with progression.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of things are with basically getting better day by day. learning new things each day, and then actually putting it to use. So even if you started a business at 21, if it fails in 3 to 4 years, the next time you start something again, it's going to be so much easier. Right. So like, imagine you started at 21, you fail, okay, at the age 25. Somebody comes out and they start a business at 25. Would you rather be the guy that starts out at 25 with no experience, or 25 having a lot of experience in failures and setbacks and understanding what works and what doesn't work? In that case, right?
Yeah.
And I guess if you think about it, then you go like, hey, actually maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I should just start now.
Yeah.
Because like, so what if I fail?
Yeah.
Like, what happens then? I mean, maybe your family and friends will come say, see, I told you, but so just you gotta just carry on with that, right? At the end of the day, right? I mean, people will say what they want to say, but at the end of the day, I guess like, as long as you do what you think is right for yourself, what you believe is fulfilling, just do it. Like, you don't really have to care much about what people would say.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and what's your kind of goal for the future?
Personally, this is also basically the journey lah for me. It's been fun, for sure. And I guess rather much do lah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, not every day you wake up and not everything that you do as part of like building a business is something that you like, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But that's not exactly that. But that shouldn't stop you, right? There are some things that you probably don't like, but you still have to do it, right?
Yeah.
Right. But I guess it's about the process and the journey. You have to like the process and the journey, right? And the kind of goals that you're going to set, right? I mean, I read this book called Grit, G-R-I-T. It shared the concepts about Olympians, right? Like, for the Olympian to win a gold medal, right? Like, they have that little one moment of basically fame. And then basically, they not say they're forgotten, but basically you don't really hear about them for like the next couple of years, right? But in the next couple of years, they are training so damn bloody hard, right? Really hard to really try and
just for
like
that one
defend their
moment.
title, or like get the gold medal again, or get a medal again. And they don't wake up every day. Let's say you're a swimmer, right? They don't wake up every day smiling like, hey, I love to swim, I want to swim. And they probably have to do this like every day at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
We don't see this happening, and of course, it's the same with business lah, right? At the end of the day, the fulfillment really comes from like showing that you achieve success in a certain space, like swimming, right? But the process of it is not something that it's not something and definitely enjoyable, right?
Right.
Because you think about it, every morning you wake up 5 a.m, you have to kill your social life, your family life, you're just swimming for hours and hours and hours, right?
Yeah.
Just to get better by maybe just a tiny fraction, right? But that's the name of the game, right? That's what they find. You have to find the journey and the process fulfilling,
Right.
If you might not like the minute of it,
Yeah.
right? You might not always like it, like there's some days probably you dread,
Yeah.
but you still have to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that's with that lah. That's with my personal perspective to, of course, building this thing lah. And I guess like it's what I like to do, so I'll probably just keep going at it,
Right.
just to build things that are meaningful,
Nice.
in my regard, meaningful lah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And just keep reinventing things. I think for me, I'll always like the journey of solving problems and creating solutions. So that's probably something what will always be geared towards too lah. You know, regardless of like what's the next adventure for me, you know, what might always be in regards to this space lah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes,
Yeah.
man.
I think the last thing that I want to ask you is, what's one piece of advice for someone that's thinking of, let's say, not continuing down what is most commonly noted as like a conventional path? Like, what would you tell this person? Of course, this shouldn't be blanket advice, but assuming you know someone like that.
Right. I mean, not everybody will be thinking this way lah.
Of course.
But I think a lot of people that are the advice, I guess, is pretty general lah. So, it's what you hear. But at the end of the day, like, advice is not say cheap lah. Advice is meaningless lah. At the end of the day, you have to act on it, or you have to act on something with regards, right? Not every advice is good at the end of the day, right? There are bad advices, right? But people just need advice to kind of like spur them lah. So I mean, what I would say is this lah. It might not apply to everyone because people might be in different stages, right? Some people might be in school, some people might be in working already.
Yeah.
And what I would just say is probably have a plan and just start, right? And it's as simple as that. But what that really just means is that, like, let's say you're working right now, right? You're working a job, right? It takes out a bulk of your time, right? The basis is, if you really want to, you have an idea that you really want to do, right? Start planning for it, right? Do a bit of research, right? Literally, like, we have the internet, everything is so accessible, right? Figure out like what you need to do, right? And just like start doing it on the side, right? You don't have to quit your job immediately, right? You can always just start and then see where it leads you to, right? A lot of people that go on this path, they do that, right? And they it's called like a side hustle. But I think the objective is always to how do you get a stage where you turn your side hustle into basically like your main hustle,
right?
Like at which point you actually like leave your job or actually pursue it fully, right? That differs from people to people. I guess it differs based on your risk appetite. Some people, maybe they see enough traction, and they could basically earn enough to just pay their meals. They would jump and go fully into it. Right. Some people, maybe they want to see it be a bit more stabilized, and then they jump fully into it. Right. But I guess it's always just about planning and starting. Right. But don't be too caught on the idea of planning. Right. Don't think you need to have like the best plan before you start. Right. Because if you go with that perspective, then you might never end up starting. Right. So plan fast and start fast.
Right.
So that's also very valuable lah. Some people get too caught up. They're like, okay. In the process of planning, they start scaring themselves. And then they don't start. Right. But it's still important to plan. Right. Because if you don't plan where you're gonna go, you don't draw out the map for yourself, then you might just end up wasting time going in circles, right?
For sure.
So do both, but make sure you do and you go fast from planning to starting. And that's when you start learning, right? So that's what people should, if you're really on the fence and you're thinking about something like that, that's really what you should do, right? Go on the internet, go to YouTube, Google, they're literally like our society's best friends like these days, right? So much you can learn on these platforms, right? If you want to start like a apparel company, right? Okay, how are you gonna do it, right? Where are you gonna get your shirts from, right? Where are you gonna find your suppliers? How is it gonna be designed, right? Okay, I need a graphic designer. Go to Google, find graphic design. You'll see a bunch of ads, right, from freelance platforms that will be like, hire a graphic designer, right? Go onto these platforms, find one, get the people to design something for you based on your concept. Let's say if you really can't design, right? Once you have a design, then you go like, okay, how do I then print this design on shirts that I can sell, right? There are a few ways to do it. People can actually do it from their own homes manually, using like t-shirt printers, which might cost a couple $100, or they can use those where they manually paint it. They use like a scraping. I'm not so familiar with the process. Or maybe if you're a bit more bold, and you have a bit more resources, you go like, oh, I'll just go online, find a t-shirt supplier.
Yeah.
You probably see platforms like Alibaba appear.
Yes.
And talk to them, understand how it works. Get it printed, get it packed, get it shipped. Then you go, how do I sell these t-shirts, right? Then go online, right? How to sell online? There's so many e-commerce platforms nowadays. Then use one of them, Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Wix. Then you go like, okay, what's next, right? These platforms provide you with an avenue to make a website, but then now you need to look
Market
nice,
it,
right? So go and buy a domain, search, right? How do I buy a domain? How do I design a website? How should a website be designed? How do I do product photography? And each one of these steps, right? You learn and you just do, and in no time, maybe like depending on how fast you learn, how fast you execute, maybe if you started with this idea of like, initially it was just, I really want to make this t-shirt and sell, right? Because my friend said the design very nice, right? You could end up having a store that ends up to selling to people on the internet, right? But of course, before you do all of that if you want to start on a smaller scale, there are ways to POC this concept, proof of concept, right? You could just get a small scale printer locally to print maybe 10 pieces, sell to your friends, use it as a way to raise money, right? And then maybe sell on Instagram or Carousel or any of these platforms where you can sell. TikTok is also a great avenue nowadays, right? And so you just test Depends on what kind of appetite, but there are ways to do it So the thing is only just really with starting. You can take this, instead of selling t-shirts, you can go sell soap bars, candles. People sell slime, anything, right? Even sunglasses. Anything you want. If you think you can create something that's better for people, there's always a market for it in that way right? Just plan the things that you need to do and then execute from the list, top down. That's really it's like the most basic advice, but the thing is that people never
overcomplicate it.
They either stay, I have no time to plan, I'm too busy in life, blah blah blah. But the fact is just that they don't want to hustle hard enough to get what they want, right? So they never even start, right? And those people that start planning, but then they go like, okay, maybe this is too difficult, this is too much work, I can't do it. They're just holding back themselves, right? Nobody starts with like all the wealth of information, right? Even the most successful people, they started at a point where they didn't know much about a certain space, and they slowly grew to become experts, right?
For sure.
So that's really the name of the game,
For sure.
about incrementally getting better and better and better day by day.
Right. That's great advice.
I hope so I mean, as long as it's useful.
Thank you guys for watching today's episode. I also like to, of course, thank Linus for coming down on a Sunday morning. He's
all good.
Busy guy, but he's made time for this. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for next week's episode.